Hi, everybody. I'm going to talk about a couple announcements and then a topic for today. First announcement, because of the whole thing with the YouTube silencing basically their content contributors, all these great YouTube bloggers like Paul Joseph Watson, especially, but also Sticks, also Lionel potentially one day. We might have to start migrating everything over to VidMe. It's going to be a weird process. I don't have a very large audience anyway. I don't really have an audience. So this would just be in order to grow an audience and start to really embrace probably the next community of online video making. Look, I started YouTube. I haven't had a lot of success on it, and I don't really care because this is just, in some ways, just a hobby for me to have fun, talk about the issues that I find are important. And that's the way it is. I don't really need people to validate what I do. I have a day job. I do talk to people, one on one about the issues I care about. And, I don't expect people to actually like me. I've never really needed anybody else to validate what I think. I just want people to have access to the ideas that I am in favor of and potentially talk about things that I want to talk about. And further on that note, I'm going to try to set up a discussion slash debate with somebody later this week. There's more details to come. It's probably going to be through Google Hangouts. I hope it's not going to be as contentious as some of my online sessions on Facebook are, where I just basically go totally nuclear. Some would say I'm super toxic. But, in certain contexts, I don't really think that's productive. Sometimes I just want to find out what makes other people tick. Now, the topic for today, and that could be in anticipation of other things to come, is the dependency industry. A lot of people have been saying, Donald Trump is going to cut Medicaid or Medicaid or Medicare, sorry, Medicaid or Medicare. He's going to cut Social Security, or he's going to privatize Social Security. And for the majority of Americans, that carries a lot of emotional risk. A lot of them do not want at all to have their benefits touched. And I can understand that. It's something that people have become accustomed to. And I certainly don't begrudge them of it. I know I have people in my family that are on benefits, and I've had them in the past too. Our family didn't grow up very well off, okay? But we have to understand that in order for this country's economy to grow, the tax burden, the government, the size of the government cannot continue to grow the way it has in the past. And the real problem I'm seeing is this obsession on the part of people, especially on the left, with guaranteeing people's access to certain services, even when those services can't get guaranteed. And I'm saying this, everybody thinks first of all of healthcare, so let's like use that as perhaps the first example, but also housing. There's an idea that all Americans should have access to housing, that shelter is a right. And, that sounds very, basic on the surface. Yes, everybody should have the ability to go home at night and be able to sleep under a roof in dry and warm conditions. Yeah, there's nobody that would say no to that. Likewise with healthcare. Nobody should go without treatment for a disease or for a traumatic injury. But their idea that this is a human right, that doesn't pan out if, and I'm saying this, if that service is defined as a right but can't be provided out of simple reality. These commodities or these services have to come from somewhere. You can't just conjure them up out of nothing. And one of the reasons that I stand so strongly about this is that um, this belief that it's a right is peddled very strongly to the minority communities, especially the blacks, nowadays also to the Hispanics, the Native Americans too. Um, you have a very uh, you have a nanny state, a very intrusive nanny state developing all over the country, and it's been developed for years, depending on what community or what class of society you're in. And I was arguing with this guy. He's on the Yvette Carnell show. His name is Arami, or I think his name is Irami Oze Frimpong, and he was trying to make the case that the government should create, as part of its reparations policy that he's in favor of, a new almost Job Corps, like the Works Progress Administration, for only black people, that they would have guaranteed jobs, especially when they're coming out of prison, if they are coming out of prison. And to me, that might be one of the most ridiculous ideas ever. Irami was trying to use the case of the New Deal to prove that this is something that would lead this country into a new economic boom or something, or that it would automatically put money in the pockets of black people. It won't. Okay, so let's say they were to be given these jobs. First of all, the WPA was set to work doing all sorts of capital projects. Okay, they weren't doing projects that the people Irami is talking about would want to do. And I'm not saying this because black people wouldn't want to do construction. I know black people who work in construction. The people who want to work in construction are already going to work in it. Okay, the people that he's talking about are generally ones that have already been getting government assistance for all sorts of needs that they've had for decades. And what he should really acknowledge, instead of denying it, is that the more you create a dependency by the subject, by the holder of this benefit, the less they're going to invest in getting off of that benefit. And in his case, I think he doesn't care about that. He would rather have the benefit continue to be tendered than actually solve the issue that's going on. Why do I say this? Look at government-controlled housing in urban centers in America. In the city that I live in, we have something called the CMHA, the Cuyahoga Municipal Housing Authority, or Metropolitan Housing Authority. And they operate all of these projects around the city. A lot of them around East 55th Street. And it's a real eye-opener sometimes when you drive past there and you just see people during in broad daylight just sitting there doing nothing. And you just see this culture of just adjustment to poverty that I've never seen anywhere. I mean, I've had stages of my childhood where we did live in, I wouldn't say poverty, but we lived in poor conditions. We didn't have often food on the table. Now, I'm not going to say this is a poverty case. I'm just saying that I can't relate to what I saw there. I can't relate to people that are standing around during the day and not doing anything. And why are they not doing anything? Look, once you create that dependency, once you have that guaranteed roof over your head, what is the motivation for you to go out and get something different? You don't have one sometimes. It's the same thing with these Indian reservations. And with them it's a little more of an extreme case because there is no alternative out there. There is no private alternative out there. Their lands are held in public trust. And what I'm driving at is that you could talk about all these things that government can give you, but you're not talking about what you're giving it in return. What you're giving it in return is your free will of action. This guy, he was trying to say, oh, you could get people to earn jobs. He was saying to set the wage amount at $20 an hour to do jobs like reading books for old people. Nobody's going to pay them to do that now. Nobody Nobody's going to pay 20 bucks for a person to read a book to an old person. That was one of the weirdest examples I've ever heard. These jobs that he was talking about are simply, he's saying these are jobs that you can't get people to do now. Well, you can't get people to do them now because nobody needs them. The idea that you need somebody to read a book to an old person is very, that's a very quaint idea. But, obviously, if it was so important, then people would be doing it now. Okay? And certainly not for 20 bucks an hour. This is somebody who has no understanding of the laws of supply and demand. Now, if you were to create this mandatory work that people would have to show up, they would have to have the job. Now, what he was also saying was that they could not be fired. These would be guaranteed federal jobs for ex-convicts. And this is a person, he should know firsthand that once you're in prison, the majority of the people become recidivists. He knows because this is somebody with no faith in the prison system for reforming people. So he's putting the cart before the horse. He's saying, yeah, we're just going to have people who were convicted felons for decades go into old folks' homes and read to them books, for example. There were a couple other examples I don't remember offhand for jobs that he was talking about. And, it's really difficult arguing with these people. They have this notion in their heads that a collective action will really solve things for everybody. The collective action is basically made by people enslaving themselves to the government. The government cannot give you things that you won't take for yourself. That's the main argument I'm saying. If they're giving you your housing and you're doing nothing to get it, and his premise is that you've already done something because your ancestors were slaves. Well, then they did it. You didn't do it. You didn't build. It's like Barack Obama said about small businesses. You didn't build that. You didn't build that. Your great grandparents did. And why should I care? Therefore, if you have that problem, the whole notion that they're owed something is irrelevant. Once they give you something for a reason that you did nothing to get, that automatically makes it an entitlement. That's just for housing. Now, for healthcare, that's a more urgent issue. Another thing that they could talk about, the food stamps issue. Does food stamps really make people better off? No, because in order to be qualified for food stamps, you have to be under a certain income level. So you can never grow beyond that level. And this is the idea that they're promoting. They're actually promoting institutionalized poverty. They don't have any plan to get people out of poverty because the whole system depends on them remaining in poverty. The whole engine for this to continue is the poverty itself. There is nothing known as prosperity. It's all a joke. It's all a joke. There's nothing. There's no plan there. There's nothing that's going into the plan that's really going to change anybody's condition from being a poor person to being a rich person. Now they would say, oh, 20 bucks an hour. That's a real good. I mean, think about it. People would automatically be bumped up. You'd finally be seeing people get above a subsistence wage. They don't understand that a subsistence wage is not pegged anywhere. The subsistence wage floats according to the conditions of the rest of the economy. And the other issue is that, let's say these guaranteed jobs were to cause a budget issue. At a certain point, if you keep having people getting hired and nobody getting fired, that's what happened to the post office, irony. That's what happened to the post office. You're building more post offices here and no customers. The post office, even with Amazon, has shrunk in its importance in the economy, and it's taken on such massive debts, and it's become so unsustainable that it's considered one of the greatest white elephants in the federal government. And that's what you're trying to do. The whole book reading to seniors I'm not going to exaggerate that example, even though I already have. All these jobs that you're talking about, they have no demand. That's the problem. They have no demand. You're saying, oh, these are jobs that are needed, but nobody wants to do them, or nobody will pay for them. That's the reason that they're not real jobs. Okay, a babysitter is not a real job. It's a gig. It is a gig. That's the way it is. And your attempt to create a profession out of it is just pathetic, because let's say, you know, there's a person who sucks at sitting your kids. Let's say there's a person who's awful at reading books, who's illiterate. He can't read to old people. Let's say there's somebody like that. If somebody comes, then what are you supposed to do? Train him how to read? You could have been doing that for him in prison if he was in prison. You could have been doing that for him in high school if he was in high school. And you certainly don't need to be paying him $20 an hour in order to learn how to do something they were supposed to learn in high school. Now, let's not go too long on this. The real problem today is that you have all of these agencies that are technically to fight poverty, and they haven't fought poverty. On the contrary, all they do is they perpetuate it, and they create this poverty industry, and the poor of America are just asking for more things instead of finding a way to get out of poverty. And this idea that you always complain about, aspirational people, that they're aspiring themselves to death, that they're trying too hard or whatever. That's just a reflection of you not realizing that's how we all have to do it. I don't care if it's you keep saying that it's worse for black people statistically. Okay, so then that's the same as people saying, you know, that this batter during the regular season has only 250 batting average. That's what you're calling your own people, the ones with the 250 batting average. So then quit. Don't even play the game. That's what you're saying, Irony. You don't even want to try at all. You're just lazy. I'm talking about you. You don't want to even try hard. And I don't care if that makes me bigoted or anything. The fact of the matter is, I've seen people succeed of all communities, and they're never going to succeed if they follow your advice. Okay? All your advice says is that people are hopeless and that there's no need for them to try hard, because all they should do is depend on the federal government. When you depend on somebody, that automatically makes you into their slave. That makes you into their bitch. And that's what you're basically advocating for. So frankly, I think you're doing more damage than I am by just saying what I think. Anyway, this is Ramon, Bold Like a Leopard. It's Bold Like a Leopard on Facebook, Chef Leopard on Twitter. I'm doing a new migration, possibly to VidMe. And have a great night, and we'll see you around the bend.